The day my father's will was read, my life seemed to be defined by disappointment. My older brother, with a smug smile and eyes glinting with greed, had inherited the family's sprawling tech empire, while I was handed an old, dilapidated farmhouse in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. In the cold, wood-paneled room where the lawyer laid out the documents, my brother laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the tension like a knife. He mocked me openly, calling me foolish, naive, and blind for thinking that after caring for our father during his final year, I would be rewarded with anything meaningful. I said nothing. I clenched my fists and let his laughter echo in my ears, trying to swallow the sting of humiliation. Then, the lawyer opened the second envelope. The laughter in the room died instantly. Every head turned toward us, every mouth closed in silent anticipation. What followed was the kind of revelation that changes everything. The crumbling farmhouse I have dismissed as worthless hid a secret my father had kept for me alone. Beneath the weeds, the rotting floorboards, and the abandoned barn lay a cache of rare earth minerals worth tens of millions of dollars, a legacy my father had designed to teach patience, humility, and foresight. The balance of power in our family, once so clearly in my brother's favor, had suddenly shifted. My name is Lucas. I am 32 years old, and I live in that farmhouse, nestled on the edge of the Arkansas River Valley in the quiet town of Buena Vista, Colorado. Each morning, I awaken to the pale light of dawn spilling over the jagged peaks of the Rockies. Their snow-capped summits shimmer in the early sun like frozen flames, while the crisp mountain air fills my lungs with a sense of freedom I have never known in the bustling streets of Denver. Here, the scent of pine, earth, and distant river water seeps into my bones, grounding me in a peace I had longed for during years of city life. I chose this life to escape noise, greed, and the relentless pressure of ambition. My days are simple, yet fulfilling. Tending to the farmhouse, maintaining the small trails that wind through the property, repairing fences, and walking the grounds to ensure everything is in order. There is dignity in simplicity, a quiet satisfaction that no empire in the world could match. Yet beneath this calm lies a tension that only time can reveal. The tension of a hidden fortune, a legacy that could turn everything upside down. Days turned into weeks, and the farmhouse that everyone had dismissed as worthless slowly revealed its secrets. Every morning I would wake before sunrise, walking through the frost-covered fields, listening to the whisper of the river as it wound through the valley. The farmhouse itself groaned with age, each creaking floorboard a reminder that time had a way of hiding stories in plain sight. While my brother thrived in his towering offices, surrounded by wealth, power, and the constant buzz of success, I found solace in solitude, discovering the hidden rhythm of life here, where every gust of wind and chirping bird felt like a message meant just for me. Yet the thought of my inheritance never left my mind. I could not shake the memory of that second envelope, the way the lawyer's hands trembled slightly as he revealed what was concealed beneath the weeds and dust. I spent hours examining the farmhouse and its surrounding land, noting every anomaly. An unusually heavy patch of soil in the barn, veins of stone that glittered faintly in the sunlight, and small, hidden seams along the old floors and walls. It was as if my father had left me a puzzle, daring me to prove my patience and attention to detail. Meanwhile, my brother's calls and messages grew sharper, tinged with arrogance and suspicion. He had caught wind that I had been exploring the property more thoroughly than anyone expected. "Don't waste your time, Lucas," he would say, his voice dripping with contempt. "That farm will never be worth a fraction of what I inherited." His words should have stung, yet they only fueled a quiet determination within me. I was beginning to understand that the real value of life, or legacy, was not always immediately visible. At night, I would sit by the old fireplace, a cup of coffee warming my hands, staring at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. The stars sparkled with a clarity I had never experienced in the city, each one a reminder of how small yet significant our lives could be. In those moments, I realized that my father's gift was more than material wealth. It was a lesson in seeing beyond appearances and valuing patience, foresight and resilience. Little did my brother know, the farm that had been the butt of his ridicule was slowly becoming a place where I could harness not only nature, but also the hidden fortune that awaited discovery. The balance was subtly shifting. While he built his empire with arrogance and blind confidence, I was quietly uncovering the secret my father had reserved for me, brick by brick, clue by clue. And the more I delved into the farm's mysteries, the more I realized that the real game, the one that would decide who truly held power in the Hartwell family, was only just beginning. Before I continue, tell from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. It was during one chilly morning, when the frost still clung stubbornly to the edges of the barn roof, that I stumbled upon the first undeniable clue of my father's hidden fortune. As I pried open a rotting wooden crate tucked into a dark corner of the barn, my hands brushed against something cold and metallic. At first I thought it was nothing more than an old tool, discarded decades ago. But as I examined it, my heart began to race. There were markings on the metal, intricate etchings that seemed almost like a code. My pulse quickened. I realized my father had left me a map, a trail only someone patient and observant could follow. The days that followed were a mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. I spent hours walking the property, inspecting the soil, digging cautiously where the land seemed denser, and marking every anomaly in a notebook that had become my constant companion. The work was painstaking, physically demanding, and at times I questioned whether the payoff would ever materialize. Yet with each new clue I uncovered, I felt a growing sense of vindication. This was no ordinary farm. It was a puzzle, a test, a carefully orchestrated challenge my father had left behind to reward persistence, insight, and loyalty. Meanwhile, my brother's messages became increasingly aggressive. He had begun sending lawyers to question my presence on the land, insinuating that I was trespassing or overstepping some invisible boundary. "Lucas, stop wasting your time with fantasies. The farm is worthless. Accept reality." His arrogance was infuriating, but it also revealed just how blind he was to the true value hidden beneath the surface. I smiled quietly to myself, knowing that he had no idea what was waiting for me, buried just below the weeds and crumbling floorboards. Evenings at the farmhouse had taken on a new intensity. By the fire, with the mountains casting long shadows across the valley, I would pore over old maps, sketching connections between clues and landmarks. The silence of the valley was no longer just peaceful, it was a companion, a witness to the unfolding revelation. Each glimmer in the river, each shadow in the barn felt significant. It was as if the land itself was speaking to me, guiding me toward a secret my brother would never see coming. By the end of the third week, I had located a section of the barn floor that, when lifted carefully, revealed a shallow cavity containing raw mineral samples, rocks that glinted with a value far beyond anything I could have imagined. The realization hit me with the force of a lightning strike. My father had designed the ultimate lesson, hiding his greatest treasure in plain sight, knowing that only patience and diligence would lead to discovery. And as I held the first handful of shimmering rocks in my hands, I felt the tides of the Hartwell family shift, ever so subtly, in my favor. My brother's laughter, once so piercing and confident, now seemed distant, hollow, and powerless. Over the next few weeks, the farmhouse transformed from a forgotten relic into the center of a discovery that would change everything. Every morning I rose with the sun and moved through the property with purpose, examining the soil, testing rocks, and mapping the contours of the land with painstaking precision. Each patch I dug revealed small veins of minerals, some glittering faintly, others reflecting light in a way that suggested something far more valuable hidden deeper below. It was as if the land itself was unfolding its secrets slowly, deliberately, rewarding careful observation and patience rather than haste. The thrill of discovery was paired with a growing awareness of the risks. My brother, emboldened by his arrogance, had begun visiting the town more frequently, ostensibly for business but with thinly veiled attempts to monitor my activities. He would call, his voice cold and accusing, demanding to know why I spent so much time tinkering with worthless soil. Each call was a reminder that the inheritance battle was far from over. Yet his ignorance was my advantage. He could not see what I was uncovering, and he could never understand the foresight my father had employed when designing this inheritance. As I delved deeper into the barn and surrounding fields, I began to uncover evidence that the mineral veins were far more extensive than I had imagined. Hidden beneath layers of earth, rocks glimmered with a luster that hinted at untold value, veins thickening as I carefully mapped their paths. The farmhouse, once a symbol of neglect and derision, was proving to be the key to a fortune that could rival my brother's empire if leveraged correctly. My father's final lesson became clearer with each passing day. True wealth is often hidden beneath what others overlook, reserved only for those willing to see with clarity and act with patience. Evenings became a time of reflection. Sitting by the fireplace, watching the mountains fade into twilight, I would plan the next day's exploration, noting the patterns in the rocks, the changes in soil density, and the subtle hints my father had embedded in every corner of the property. The silence of the valley was no longer just peaceful, it was purposeful, guiding me, testing me, and preparing me for a confrontation that was inevitable. I knew that when the time came, my brother's laughter would no longer matter. I was ready to prove that patience, foresight, and diligence outweighed arrogance and entitlement. The balance of power, once so heavily in his favor, was shifting with every shovelful of earth I removed. I was not just discovering minerals, I was discovering the truth about my father's intentions, the real measure of inheritance, and the legacy of strategy and wisdom that he had reserved for me alone. And deep down, I knew that the moment of revelation was drawing near. The farmhouse, the barn, the hidden veins beneath my feet, they were all part of a story my brother could never have predicted. By the 5th week, the farmhouse no longer felt like a simple home. It had become a labyrinth of secrets and discoveries. Each morning I ventured further into the property, tracing the veins of minerals that my father had hidden so carefully. What had begun as small glimmers beneath the barn floorboards had expanded into a network of deposits sprawling across the land, rich with rare earth minerals and precious stones whose value was beyond anything my brother could imagine. The realization sent a thrill coursing through me. The farm, once mocked and dismissed, held a fortune that could rival even the empire my brother had inherited. The contrast between our lives could not have been starker. He spent his days amidst boardrooms, power suits, and stock portfolios, blind to the riches literally lying beneath my feet. I, on the other hand, had learned the rhythm of the land, understood its hidden patterns, and discovered a wealth reserved for someone patient enough to earn it. With each sample I collected and mapped, I felt the power slowly tipping in my favor, a reversal that would humiliate him as thoroughly as he had humiliated me. I began documenting everything meticulously. Every mineral vein, every glimmering rock, every hidden seam was recorded, mapped, and photographed. This was no longer merely exploration, it was a strategy. My father had given me the tools, the inheritance, and the test. Now it was turned to demonstrate that vision, diligence, and patience mattered far more than arrogance and entitlement. And the more I documented, the more the farm's true value revealed itself. The tension with my brother escalated. He began showing up in town more frequently, thinly veiled attempts at intimidation evident in every visit. "Lucas, you need to stop digging around that place," he warned one afternoon, his voice tight with anger. "It's worthless, and you're wasting your time." I merely smiled, a quiet confidence growing in me that he could neither see nor understand. He could never have anticipated that his laughter and scorn would lead me to uncover something that would not only match, but exceed everything he had been given. By the end of the 5th week, I stood on the ridge overlooking the farmhouse, the valley stretching out beneath me. The sun glinted off the mineral veins in the soil below, and I could feel, with an almost tangible certainty, the shift in power that was coming. My father had trusted me with a fortune hidden in plain sight, a final message to prove that wealth was not simply inherited but earned. And as I stared out over the land that had once seemed so insignificant, I knew the moment was approaching when the Hartwell family hierarchy, long dominated by my brother's arrogance, would finally be overturned. The moment of truth was drawing near. Each day I dug deeper, mapping the veins of minerals with precision and care, uncovering caches that shimmered with a value I could barely comprehend. The farm, once ridiculed and dismissed, was revealing itself as a gold mine, a fortune my brother could never have imagined. Every glint of metal, every vein in the rocks spoke of my father's foresight, a test designed not only to reward patience, but also to expose who truly understood the meaning of legacy. My brother's arrogance had begun to crack. Calls became frantic, filled with a tension he could not hide. "Lucas, I'm serious. Stop this nonsense," he demanded one morning. His voice was sharp, trembling slightly with the first hints of fear. "You don't know what you're doing. That farm is worthless." I let his words wash over me, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. He had no idea how wrong he was. He had always measured worth in titles, buildings, and profits, never in patience, diligence, and insight. One evening as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the valley in shades of gold and purple, I stood in the barn with the final piece of the puzzle in my hands. A small compartment beneath the floorboards, cleverly concealed and long forgotten, held the last of the mineral samples. Their sheer size and quality confirmed what I had suspected for weeks. The farm was worth more than his empire, more than he had ever dreamed possible. My father had left me this legacy deliberately, a final message that true value is often hidden in plain sight and reserved for those willing to see beyond appearances. The weight of the revelation was overwhelming. I felt a rush of vindication, not just for the injustice of being mocked at the will reading, but for the years of patience, hard work, and quiet determination that had led me to this moment. I realized that the farm, the rivers, the mountains, and the very air of Buena Vista had conspired to guide me to the reward my father intended. It was more than minerals. It was a lesson in resilience, in foresight, and in the quiet power of someone underestimated by those around them. I knew the confrontation with my brother was inevitable. He would come to see the farm, to understand that his laughter, arrogance, and greed had blinded him to what was right in front of him. And when that moment arrived, I would not need words to prove my victory. The land itself, with its shimmering veins of wealth and promise, would speak for me. The Hartwell family's balance of power, once skewed entirely in his favor, was about to be rewritten, and there would be no denying who had truly inherited the wisdom, foresight, and fortune my father had intended. The day my brother finally arrived at the farmhouse, the air itself seemed charged with tension. He had always carried himself with a sense of superiority, believing that the empire he inherited was the measure of our father's favor. But as he stepped out of his car and looked across the property, a subtle unease flickered in his eyes. The farmhouse, the barn, the surrounding fields, what he had once dismissed as nothing, now seemed different, alive in a way he could not comprehend. I met him at the edge of the barn, my hands steady, my heart calm. Every step I took echoed the quiet confidence I had built over weeks of meticulous exploration and patient discovery. I guided him into the barn, letting the dust rise around us like a ghostly curtain, and for a moment he looked around with faint derision, expecting nothing more than rot and ruin. Then, deliberately, I lifted the floorboards in the corner, revealing the first veins of shimmering minerals. His smug expression faltered,
I could see his mind racing, trying to reconcile the reality before him with the assumptions he had made all these years. The veins glittered with a metallic glow, catching the morning sun and reflecting it back with a brilliance that took his breath away. "What, Lucas, this—" he stammered, his voice cracking. His eyes darted around, searching for some trick, some illusion, but there was none. Every rock, every seam in the floor, every hidden compartment spoke the truth. This farmhouse was far more valuable than any empire he had inherited. I led him further, revealing more caches beneath the barn, along the edge of the fields and inside the old well, each discovery layering shock upon shock. His arrogance, so carefully honed over the years, began to crumble under the weight of undeniable proof.
I watched him carefully, noting the shift in his posture, the pallor in his face, the way his hands trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the minerals. Why didn't you?" he asked, barely able to form complete sentences. I didn't need to answer. The truth was written in the land itself, in the legacy my father had carefully hidden from me alone. The farm, once considered worthless, had been transformed into a treasury, the fortune so vast it made everything he had inherited seem small and hollow. We stepped outside, and I showed him the full extent of the property, mapping out the veins of minerals that snaked beneath the fields, the barn, and the surrounding hills. He began to understand that this inheritance was not about luck or favoritism. It was about insight, patience, and the courage to see value where others saw nothing. I explained nothing. The land spoke for itself, and its message was clear. Every rock, every hidden seam, every glittering vein told the story of my father's final lesson, designed to overturn arrogance and reward wisdom. The humiliation was complete, though unspoken. My brother, who had mocked me in front of the family, who had laughed at my supposed misfortune, now stood silent, stripped of his superiority. For the first time, he understood what I had always known. True inheritance is not measured by power, offices, or wealth amassed in boardrooms. It is measured by patience, perception, and the ability to recognize hidden value. I walked to the edge of the ridge, overlooking the valley. The wind brushing across my face, carrying the scents of pine, earth, and river water. I looked back at the farmhouse, now transformed in my mind from a simple home into a kingdom of secrets and fortune. The mountains glistened in the late afternoon sun, their snow-capped peaks reflecting a brilliance that mirrored the minerals below. For the first time, I felt the full weight of my father's message, the brilliance of his foresight, and the triumph of what I had accomplished. When my brother finally left, defeated and silent, I understood that nothing would ever be the same. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. What he had inherited in arrogance, I had earned in insight. And as I returned to the farmhouse, touching the walls, the floors, and the land itself, I realized that this was more than wealth. It was validation. It was justice. It was a legacy that only I could fulfill. The Hartwell family hierarchy had been rewritten, not with confrontation, not with anger, but with patience, wisdom, and the quiet courage to see the value in what everyone else overlooked. Sitting that night by the fireplace, the glow of the minerals I had carefully stored reflecting off the walls, I finally allowed myself to smile fully. A smile of triumph, satisfaction, and peace. My father had given me more than riches. He had given me the ultimate lesson, and I had passed it. The farmhouse, once laughed at, now stood as a testament to perseverance, insight, and the enduring truth that what seems insignificant often holds the greatest power. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the mountains, the wind, and the whisper of the river, I knew the story was complete, my victory absolute, my inheritance fully realized,
and the Hartwell name forever balanced.